Okay, I'm going to use this example to talk about what happens when you pass objects to methods, and also whenever you use an object as an instance member for the creation of another object, kind of like our carpet calculator lab. This one has the driver that keeps up with the credit card amount, what's the person's name who's charging, and what's their address. Okay, so I have 4 classes here, but here's the driver, so really 3 objects I can create. All right, so again, I'm going to go straight down to where I'm going to create the address object to use. And within this address, I give it a street, a city, a state, and a zip. So when I see this new keyword, I know that I'm going to have to go over and look at address and make sure my constructor, here's the constructor, is catching the exact same pieces of information that I'm passing in, and it is. And here's all my instance members. And I do not have to use the this keyword in front of any of these, because the name of the arguments being passed in is not the name of the instance members. And since I want each object instance to have its own street, its own city, and its own state, plus zip, I'm not going to put the word static in here. Because if I put static in here, that means all the objects I create will use the same state if I put static on state. Okay, so back here now I have my address created, and here's my object name. When I'm ready to create the person who's charging's object, that one holds, and I can go over to person. It holds a last name, a first name, and then it has an address object as its instance. Okay? So when I create a person, it expects 2 strings and then the address object that I have created passed to it. Now when you pass objects, it's just like passing arrays. You are not taking just one piece of data, really. You are passing the reference, the memory location where that object is stored. So when I create person with this object name, it also drags along my ability to call all of these methods and have access to the data that's in the object that I'm passing. So I'm dragging the whole thing with me over to person. So now I assign my last name and my first name, and when I'm ready to assign my object, well, it's still an address, so I have to tell it I'm catching an address, and that's the name. And then I can just set my address object name in the person to the address object name that I'm passing over. It just simply sets home right here to the memory location that residence. They're both looking at the same memory location, so I can get to all of the methods and instance members data as long as anywhere in this program now I put home period what's the method I want to access. So if I go down and look at this, notice it says home.toString. Well, then it's going to print the data that was in this object when it got passed in to create my person object. So don't think of it as something extremely difficult. It's just that you have access now to more than just a variable piece of data. You have access to everything that's in the address class. the same thing when I pass my person, object, owner to my credit card. Well, I'm going to have to catch that as a person. So I go over here and sure enough, there's my person that I'm catching. There's my person object as the instance member or instance object of the credit card. All I have to do is set the pieces of information, and anytime I want to access any of the methods or any of the data that's in that person object, I simply say owner dot. So when I go down here, owner dot toString, so it's going to go to the method toString that is in owner and use the data that I passed into the person constructor when I made owner. Now I'm going to cut that off right there because you can look at these. I didn't discuss money. It's in there, but you're going to see that as you look at the code, how these work out. When you use the dot, why you use the dot, which methods is it actually getting to, and how does it know the data. It's the data at the time you create the object. So owner is going to have access to this data. It's also going to have access to the add, which is this data. I hope this explains passing objects and how that works.